The hearing will come to order. And I thank members for being here. I think many of us are still trying to process what happened yesterday with the assassination of young Charlie Kirk. Today is also the anniversary of 9/11. On the morning of 9/11, I was meeting with the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon when that attack began in New York, and I had just left the Pentagon when it happened there. And so I think we were all stunned by the acts of political violence that have occurred over the past year and more. And so if it's all right, let's pause for a moment of silence in memory of all that has occurred to us and our country. Thank you. This morning, the committee meets to consider the nomination of General Christopher J. Mahoney for the position of Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Before we begin, we've done the moment of silence. Let's turn to today's business now. General Mahoney has a tremendous responsibility before him. I believe President Trump has made an excellent choice in selecting him for his role. His fellow service members tell us he's an admirable leader. We live in the most dangerous national security moment since World War II. I've said this at the beginning of almost every hearing we've had this entire year. An axis of aggressors led by the Chinese Communist Party and Vladimir Putin's Russia means us harm. Our adversaries have started wars against Ukraine and against Israel, and now they threaten to open a third front against Taiwan. There's also the fourth front within our own hemisphere as Chinese fentanyl flows into America amid the cartel's murderous drug and human trafficking operations. In the Middle East, President Trump launched Operation Rough Rider against the Iran-backed Houthis. This strengthened historic U.S. partnerships in the Gulf. During his visit to the region in May, the president signed deals totaling $2 trillion. Most significantly, the president backed his commitment that Iran would never be permitted to develop a nuclear weapon. He took action in June, striking Iran's nuclear sites. In the Pacific, China's military activities are at an all-time high. China is reflecting what Admiral Paparo has described as a, quote, rehearsal for war. Senator Fisher and I saw these preparations firsthand during a recent trip to the region. We encountered resolute partners in Taiwan, Palau, and the Philippines. These friends are willing to share the burden of deterring the Chinese Communist Party from aggression. Xi Jinping also remains the largest backer of war criminal Vladimir Putin's quest to prolong the bloodshed in Ukraine. President Putin has chosen to put Russia on a wartime footing. If we are to prioritize dealing with the threat from China, we will need a strong transatlantic alliance capable of deterring Russian aggression. President Trump affirmed his commitment to European security at the NATO summit and catalyzed a new era of rearmament among NATO allies. And this committee, up and down both sides of the dais, has been part and parcel to that. In our own hemisphere, President Trump has restored security at our border. In short, President Trump has shown that America first means American interests first, and American interests are not confined to a single continent. To protect these interests, including peace and prosperity for Americans, the Pentagon requires a sustained trillion-dollar budget alongside fundamental reform of its acquisition and budget processes. If confirmed, General Mahoney will lead a crucial portion of this reform. Our military's process for generating requirements for our warfighters. The Vice Chairman leads the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. Today, the Council takes an average of 800 days simply to approve the military's need for a weapon system. 800 days. That's way too long. With technology and threats moving quickly, we can no longer spend years debating what the perfect solution will look like 5 or 10 years in the future. The Forged Act seeks to streamline the bureaucracy, and this committee is leading the charge for that in the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. If he's confirmed, I look forward to working with General Mahoney to make progress in this era. General Mahoney is exceptionally well qualified to take on these challenges as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His decades of leadership in the Marine Corps have trained him to understand the value of joint warfare in light of the complexity of the threats our nation faces. I also know the President will benefit greatly from his candid advice. With that, I turn to my friend and colleague, Ranking Member Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me join you in recognizing the victims of political violence over the last several years, and also on this 9/11, those who died and were injured on the attack on not on New York City, but Washington, D.C. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that moment of silence. And General Mahoney, welcome. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for stepping forward to continue your long career of service. And I extend my appreciation to family. I want to recognize your wife, Mary, who's back there. Thank you for all you've done. We were trying to figure out how we got so far. Now we know. Generally, you're exceptionally qualified to serve as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and you have my complete support. You currently serve as the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, and you've led a distinguished career in the United States Marines as a pilot with deployments around the world and command at every level. Your experience and understanding of the Joint Force will serve you well. As important, your reputation as a candid and forthright officer will be depended upon and tested in this situation. General, I am concerned about the state of the Joint Force you will help lead if confirmed. Over the past year, and especially in the recent months, we have seen an alarming erosion of the civil, political, and military norms in this country. The administration has taken unprecedented steps to politicize the military, in my view, steps that threaten the very foundation of civilian military trust and the rule of law. We have seen many senior generals, admirals, and intelligence leaders dismissed for no given reason, but evidence suggests that each refused to toe the political line or provided professional advice that contradicted the administration's political claims. We have seen troops deployed into our own cities, not in response to natural disasters or national emergencies, but to make a political point, resulting in intimidation and division. Across the country, U.S. troops are being pulled into mass deportation operations, missions far outside their core warfighting role, risking readiness and eroding the trust between the military and the American people. Inside the Pentagon, Secretary Hicks has dedicated significant time and resources to search for leakers, including grilling career military officers, threatening their jobs, and creating a climate of fear. At the military service academies, books are being removed from libraries and diversity programs dismantled, not because they harm readiness, but because they offend a political agenda. This will not increase lethality. It will undermine the ability of our next generation of officers to think critically and lead Americans from all walks of life. And across the Department of Defense, arbitrary personnel cuts are hollowing out expertise and leaving critical positions unfilled, weakening our ability to deter our adversaries and protect the nation. Every day, we are seeing the real dangerous impacts of these firings and reprisals. Perhaps most alarming of all, the President is fundamentally challenging the rule of law. Last week, the President ordered an airstrike on a speedboat off the coast of Venezuela, which reportedly killed 11 people. This was a premeditated use of lethal force carried out without congressional authorization, without clear legal justification, and without evidence of an imminent threat. I have yet to see any intelligence, legal rationale, or orders related to this attack. Over the past several months, the administration has deployed major naval and air assets into the Southern Command AOR, including an amphibious squadron with roughly 4,500 Marines and sailors, 3 destroyers, a guided missile cruiser, a fast attack submarine, F-35 fighter aircraft, and P-8 reconnaissance aircraft. The real cost and opportunity costs of this operation are significant, and clearly the administration intends to expand its operations. I am concerned that we may be stumbling into war through reckless actions of a small group in the administration, a war that will surprise most Americans because neither Congress nor the public have been informed about the objective of this military buildup. General, I'm concerned that this administration is silencing military leaders from providing both legal advice and best military advice, or even speaking honestly about operations. When generals and admirals are afraid to tell the truth, we lose the very candor that keeps our nation safe. This is not about politics, it's about war and peace. The oath that each military service member takes is to the Constitution, not to a single individual. General Mahoney, these are but a few of the ongoing challenges you will need to consider. During today's hearing, I expect and I'm confident you will pledge to always provide your best military advice to the President and the Secretary of Defense, even if that advice is not what they would want to hear. Like every other senior officer who comes before the committee, I expect you'll also give us your best and unfiltered military opinion, even if those views differ from the administration. And I expect you to be responsive to this committee when we request briefings and information to assist in our oversight of the department. The safety of our American service members and the American people depends upon such candor. General, if confirmed, you will help lead the Joint Force at a momentous time. Thank you, and I look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. And now, it's my duty to ask you a series of questions, General Mahoney, that this committee poses to all military nominees. To exercise its legislative and oversight responsibilities, it's important that this committee and other committees and other appropriate committees of the Congress be able to receive testimony, briefings, and other communications of information. Have you adhered to the applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
I have, Senator.
Do you agree when asked to give your personal views, even if those views differ from the administration in power?
I will, Senator.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
I have not, Senator.
Will you ensure your staff complies with deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record in hearings?
I will, Senator.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will, Senator.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
They will.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request before this committee?
I do, Senator.
Do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electronic forms of communications?
I do, Senator.
In a timely manner. Will you do so in a timely manner?
I'll do in a timely manner as well.
When requested by a duly constituted committee or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents? Now the answer.
I will, Senator.
All right, thank you very much. Now, at this point, you are recognized for your opening statement, and you might want to comment about your family. I don't know.
I think I'll be in trouble if I didn't. But Chairman Wicker and Ranking Member Reed and all the members of the committee, thank you and good morning. I would be remiss if I didn't pause to comment just briefly on the way to this day. 24 years ago, America was struck cowardly by people who mistook slaughter for strength. From the smoke and the ruin of that morning came a generation of Americans who have carried forward the memory of the fallen, but not just in their words, in their dedication and in their deeds. And it's in that spirit, I hope, that I am here before you this morning. I'm honored to be the President's nominee to be the next Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I appreciate his confidence. I also want to thank Secretary Hegseth and Chairman Kane for their trust and confidence in my nomination. I'm also grateful to this committee for the time afforded me over the last week or so. The candid conversations and the perspectives have been invaluable. I also want to thank this committee for your tireless work in addressing the tough challenges that face the department. From acquisition to reform, your efforts in emphasizing clean audit, just to name two, have propelled the joint force forward and increased our readiness and lethality. I want to thank the team that prepared me and worked tirelessly with their patience and professionalism. Most of all, Senator Wicker, I want to thank my family. My wife and my children, my son and my daughter, have been a source of strength throughout my career. Countless moves, missed holidays, the unpredictable rhythm of military service. I will say without a doubt, though, that the experiences of my family, the friendships we have made, have been priceless along the way. Their support has made my service possible, and I'm forever grateful. I would also like to thank Admiral Grady and his wife, Christine, for their 41 years of service. Serving alongside him for the last 2 years has been, number one, an honor, and number two, a PhD in military management. His steady leadership through some pretty tumultuous times has helped us face global challenges and has strengthened the joint foundation that I hope to be able to build on if I'm confirmed. I take this opportunity seriously, and I want to assure the committee that if confirmed, my experience has prepared me for this role. And I want to get to your question, so I'll be brief. I hail from Massachusetts. I grew up on the South Shore. I was trained as a fighter pilot by the Marine Corps. Trained as an infantry officer by the Marine Corps, as a fighter pilot by the Navy, to fly for the Air Force to strike targets for the Army using Space Force queuing assets. I've seen how we fight across the joint force and how we have to be prepared for the next fight. If confirmed, that experience will help frame the challenges that determine and bring our focus now. As we look ahead, we must recognize that the security environment is more dynamic, more unstable than any point in recent memory. While we maintain and strengthen our homeland defense, China and Russia routinely challenge international norms and seek to undermine our interests both near and abroad. Rogue regimes and malicious criminal actors threaten regional stability, and terrorist networks persist. In the most nascent domains, space, cyber, they're no longer novel. Now, they are the new normal. These challenges demand our joint force remain ready now while evolving to the future. Meeting these challenges will require continued modernization, innovation at speed and at scale, not just within our own outfit, but with industry, all of industry, balancing our capability and capacities with our allies and partners, and deepening our integration across the services and, importantly, the COCOMs. We must invest in advanced capabilities, strengthen our joint warfighting concepts, and maintain our technical edge while never losing sight of the most precious asset we've got that is proven time and time again, and that's our people. It is our most critical advantage. If confirmed, I will continue to ensure and work to make our joint force ready, lethal, and capable of prevailing against any enemy. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. So I'll take a 5-minute round of questioning. General, much of the funding in the Defense Reconciliation Bill is unspecific and will technically be at the direction of the Department of Defense, though we have provided recommendations for them. General Mahoney, a quick yes or no question for you. Will you carry out the congressional intent for reconciliation funding in the One Big Beautiful Bill?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now let's talk about JROC, the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. This is a Pentagon group led by the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It oversees the process for defining military needs for new weapon systems. As I mentioned in my opening statement, a 2021 GAO report found that approving these needs often takes over 800 days, far longer than the target of 100 days. We're trying to correct that in the Forged Act by removing the JROC as an approval authority and focusing on collaborating with COCOM commanders to identify and prioritize. I'm going to ask you to comment about this. Our NDAA, which I hope is enacted and at least moved from the Senate relatively soon, seeks to move the focus of the JROC from reviewing paperwork to designing future force. So do you agree with this approach?
Senator, I agree with the reform approach, end to end, from requirements to resources, and the Forged Act moves us along that trajectory.
All right, well, I certainly hope we can do this. Let's talk now about autonomous drones. And certainly, we've seen some news about that just in the last day or two, with Russia illegally sending drones into Poland, a NATO ally of the United States. But whether they're aerial, sea surface, or subsea, we're relying on these, the so-called attritable autonomy, because if we lose it, which we will, it's not a huge budget buster. We need to provide the Pentagon with billions of dollars to scale these programs. They do cost less, although they're not free, but there is the matter of storing them and keeping them from the elements. You can't just leave a drone out in the desert or out in the snow. You commented about this, about the logistics needed to support them. So are we actually in the right places? Have we enabled the infrastructure we need for storage, electricity, and more? And what are your plans should you be confirmed by the Congress?
Senator, you bring up a lot of great points. The first is autonomy, and we've seen artificial intelligence build into the ability of weapon systems, in this case drones, to be able to communicate between each other, to be able to recognize objective areas, recognize targets, and then choose targets and bring that into the decision loop. We have to move faster in this regard, whether it's remote systems, semi-autonomous or autonomous, to bring those to, as you say, a scalable level, but also recognize the fully encumbered cost, from flyaway cost to storage to maintenance. And we need to accelerate along all of those to make sure that, number one, we're investing in the technology, that it's affordable, but we have fully encumbered the consideration so that we don't end up buying into something that costs more than we believed, calling it attritable at the beginning.
Thank you very much. I have 35 seconds. I think I'll save that till the end. Senator Reed, you're recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and once again, congratulations, General Mahoney. Well-deserved, and I'm very pleased that you're here. You've just pledged that you will give your best military opinion to your superiors as well as the Congress, even if it disagrees with the opinion of your leadership, both uniformed and civilian. And I have no doubt you will. You are a man of your word. How do you emphasize this ethic throughout the joint force so that everyone is ready to stand up?
Sir, I've been at this for 38 years. I don't expect to get orders that are illegal or would even walk the line. From a personal perspective, I took an oath as a second lieutenant. I have taken it again and again, once again for 38 years. And in that oath, it's an oath to the idea of the United States, to the Constitution. And among my fellow officers, among my fellow Marines, we propound that time and time again.
These difficult orders usually come in the gray zone, where you're looking for clarity, and the institutional clarity typically comes from the judge advocate generals. If you're in a situation like this, will you pursue such opinions and follow the legal guidance?
Senator, I will. And once again, it's been my experience. I have never climbed into the cockpit with weapons in the bay or on the wings without understanding completely from the operational law perspective, the ROE perspective, and the law of armed conflict perspective. It's absolutely critical.
Thank you. Do you agree that the Department of Defense should be responsive to Congress, especially with respect to information required by law, that we should get the key facts immediately or as soon as required?
So I believe we should always comply with the law, and as I started the testimony, being timely with our responses to Congress.
Thank you, sir. In your role as head of the JROC, what do you think you can do to improve interoperability between the services?
Specific to the JROC, should I be confirmed, I'll continue the great work that Admiral Grady has done in ensuring that joint requirements are truly requirements, that service-specific requirements can be developed by the services, but in the joint enterprise, the JROC will take, analyze, and bring those decisions forward for recommendation for funding.
Now, excuse me, sir, go ahead. No, go ahead, sir.
As indicated, the JROC, the concept, I think, is completely valid. We have to get rid of some of the bureaucracy, and Admiral Grady has started down that road. We have to make the process less burdened by paperwork and more sensitive to speed and product.
Well, I think that's right, and I commend the chairman for his efforts in this NDAA to give you those tools. Are there any specific tools, though, that you think you need or you will use with respect to generating these requirements?
I think what we need to do is look at the authorities that we have now, look at some of the language in Forged. On the House side, we have speed. We also just got done with a report from last year called the 811 report, which come with a bunch of very, very good recommendations. And then an outlier that's a little bit old that I think we should bring into the conversation is the PPBE report that Bob Hale and Ellen Lord chaired that also bring great ideas in. When we look at this and we take best of breed, I think we will get a process once again from determining a gap, looking at the solutions against that gap, getting a coherent and quick acquisition strategy, and meaningfully, and this is important, synchronizing that with the resources. Those three things, often treated as separate pillars, I believe are a system. And if you don't treat them as a system, you're going to break down somewhere.
Well, my time is expiring, but just one point is that we might send a request and follow-up. But the JSIDS has been disestablished, and we're left wondering what process will take its place. And if you could fill us in on that in a timely way, I'd appreciate it.
Senator, I'd be happy to come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, General, and thank you for your service and your family as well. I appreciated the conversation that we were able to have in the SCIF and the focus we had on JROC. I would follow up with ranking member's comment on the JSIDS process. I think we have a real opportunity here to fundamentally change that requirement process and be able to leverage resources. So I am also interested in your views and any thoughts you may have on that in the future as well. You also mentioned the PPB&E reform and touched on kind of a broad category of recommendations. Do you have any specific ones that stood out?
The report comes up with a lot of very common sense recommendations. Some of the ones that I believe in the department, we may have authorities right now, but we may have to, if we come close to the line, come back to this committee and others for some authorities relief. Flexibility in the year of execution and the availability of funds. For operations and maintenance funds, they're available for a year. Flexibility to bring them across fiscal years to 2 or 3 years would help. Also, built-in protections against continuing resolutions so that we're not living our modernization life by anomalies. To my knowledge, Mr. Putin and Mr. Xi don't do modernization by anomalies. That would help. Those are two ideas, but there are many common sense ones throughout that. One more that comes to mind as the old budget guy is flexibility with the threshold amounts for reprogramming. In other words, being able to take larger amounts and move them across budget activities or move them across accounts so that we spend them the way the taxpayers meant it to be spent.
Okay, great, thank you. With combatant commanders, have, you're looking at their concerns that they have and any operational requirements that they have, how are you going to take those into consideration in the future JROC processes?
Yeah, the combatant commanders' requirements are extremely important. They're critical, and quite frankly, they're the engine that's going to make the integration of the joint force run. So, if confirmed through the JROC process and other processes, the combatant commanders' sensitivities, requirements will be brought to the fore and treated very seriously.
Okay, thank you. Senator King, who's not here right now, but he and I are on strategic forces, and we often refer to the NC3 as the fourth leg of the triad. And the President's ability to command, control, and communicate with our nuclear forces, I know you understand how important that is. It underpins our entire deterrent. Unfortunately, the services have not consistently prioritized modernizing NC3 systems. The JROC and now the sunsetting JSIDS process provided a framework. It was a cumbersome one, but it was provided to ensure the proper resourcing of those NC3 systems. If confirmed, how do you plan to work with the Secretary, the services, STRATCOM, to ensure that NC3 modernization efforts are going to progress in a not just coordinated, but also a timely manner?
Yeah. Ma'am, as you well state, strategic stability is undergirded by our strategic posture, our strategy, and we have to understand that we have the rise of another nuclear peer in China. If I am confirmed on the JROC, we will take on this new challenge and make sure that the requirements and gaps are filled expeditiously and married up with resources to the extent that I can influence it. The nuclear posture review is pretty clear about where we are with the terrestrial leg, where we are with the maritime leg, where we are with the air-delivered leg, and as you point out, NC3 being that fourth leg, and we need to modernize and accelerate all of those.
You need to be on schedule at least, right?
That's a start, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. In the FY24 NDAA, Congress established a program of record for SLCM, and that was to fill a capability gap that currently exists there. Are you familiar with the program?
I am somewhat familiar, ma'am.
Okay. I'm sure you'll look into it, make sure it's on time.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Rounds will take the chair for a few moments. Senator Shaheen, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, General Mahoney. Thank you for taking time to talk with me last week. I appreciated our conversation. Many of us on this committee have concerns about rumors that we have heard about plans to withdraw U.S. forces from NATO's eastern flank, from the Korean Peninsula, and from the Middle East. And on a bipartisan basis, as you may be aware, we limited the executive branch's ability to hastily withdraw without consulting with and certifying to Congress the effects of such a withdrawal on U.S. national security. I'm particularly concerned about maintaining U.S. leadership at NATO. That not only ensures U.S. command and control of our forces on the continent, but it gives us control over the nuclear weapons in Europe. I also just returned from Syria, where the U.S. is supporting the counter-ISIS mission, and ISIS regaining a foothold in the country would not only be detrimental to the security and stability for a post-Assad Syria, but to the region and ultimately to the United States, given the resources and lives that we've put into defeating ISIS in Syria. So can you talk about the benefits of having U.S. presence in these theaters? And if confirmed, do you commit to being transparent to Congress about what the plans are with respect to decisions about these theaters?
Senator, I think our presence is critical. I think striking a balance with our allies and partners, not only in capability but in capacity, is extremely important. And I commit to sharing as much information as I can with you and with the committee and others.
And do you have any sense of whether there are currently plans to withdraw from any of those theaters?
Senator, I have no knowledge of the policy that would drive that.
Thank you. Last week, we also discussed the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which has been having real challenges in hiring new workers due to delays at the Pentagon, but mostly from the Office of Personnel Management, and the impact that these policies will have long-term over our Navy's ability to ensure that our nuclear submarines are ready and operating. The shipyard normally needs to hire about 550 workers a year to keep up with the demand for submarine maintenance. Because of the delays in hiring, next year they're going to need to hire 700 people. That means more time spent on training, less time available for maintenance and operations. That leads to delays. So can I get a commitment from you, General, that you'll help us to maintain stability and predictability in the hiring process at our public shipyards to avoid these kinds of delays?
Ma'am, extremely important subject, and if confirmed, you have my commitment.
Thank you very much. I know it's something that the Secretary of the Navy has also been concerned about, and I've raised it with Secretary Hegseth at a hearing as well. And I want to also follow up on our conversation about the readiness of the joint force, because since we spoke, the President has authorized military force in the Caribbean Sea. As I'm sure you know from your current position, when the 2 Iwo Jima Amphibious Readiness Group left for its deployment to the Caribbean, the Navy's amphibious fleet was at a 41% readiness rate. That's only half of the rate that the Marines need to complete current missions. General Smith has called that a crisis. Further, the Lake Erie cruiser just left the Indo-Pacific to join the 2 Iwo Jima and 2 destroyers in the Caribbean. The Pentagon has also sent our F-35 stealth fighter jets to Puerto Rico. We've seen the National Guard sent to Washington and active duty Marines sent to Los Angeles in the middle of training for a planned deployment. So the resources are being diverted from deterring the PRC in the Indo-Pacific and maintaining assets needed to respond to crises in other parts of the world. Can you talk about how you see the military responding to compensate for that readiness loss because of those deployments?
Ma'am, any deployment that we go on, any mission that we go on will incur some cost in readiness if you're not training to all of your core mission essential tasks. So it's incumbent first to assess the risk. There's risk in not training to a certain task. There's risk over time if you continue not to train to it. And we make those assessments in every deployment that we make. So lately, we're doing the same thing. 2 techniques that we use, and I've used as a commander. We have in situ training to make a training plan to mitigate against the training that we're losing, and we have a rotational plan that we used on the border and we've used in other places. I used it in combat to bring people off the line to train to other mission essential tasks and then put them back in, which has been fairly effective.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. General, I appreciated our discussion in my office, and I want to thank you for your service to the nation and for being here in front of us today. General, I want to be consistent. We have discussed spectrum before, but I wanted to bring it up publicly with you today. I've heard from over 30 senior Pentagon officials in public hearings over the last 2.5 years, including every service chief and 8 combatant commanders, who all agree that vacating the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz band of the electromagnetic spectrum would have significantly negative consequences for our warfighting capabilities. In fact, the Department of the Navy previously estimated that relocating their systems to a different spectrum band would cost them $250 billion. Both the Navy and the Marine Corps intend to make extensive use of capabilities which require the electromagnetic spectrum to function in the Western Pacific against China. General, does the joint force have capabilities operating on the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz band and the 7 and 8 gigahertz bands of the spectrum, which would be used in a conflict with China?
Yes, Senator, we do. Extensive capabilities.
Would those capabilities be negatively impacted if you were forced to vacate those bands or share them with commercial users in a non-optimal manner?
Yes, Senator, they would, as I understand it.
Thank you. General, in my office, we discussed the possibility or the possible near-term threat of a conflict involving multiple adversaries in multiple theaters. Some key observers assess that our adversaries will seek to press their advantage in the event we are committed in another area, particularly given the increasingly close coordination between China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. We've looked at this through the NDAA. You will find it mentioned again in this year's NDAA as being proposed. How can we better posture to maintain deterrence in multiple theaters? And just thinking about it, what is it going to mean in terms of resources, capabilities, and authorities that the joint force would need to consider with the fact that this is a very likely scenario should we have an adversarial conflict in one of those theaters?
Senator, I don't think anybody is surprised by the relationship, say, between Russia and China, China and Iran, Russia and North Korea. I think what may surprise some people is the depth of that relationship and the interactions that have been going on, which support the statement you made. If there is a conflict in one area, there may be a reflex or reactive conflict in another. And from the joint force, and if confirmed and to the level of my influence, I'll make sure that we're balanced in our capability and capacity against the most dangerous and the most likely courses of action should that happen.
Thank you. General, we discussed high-pressure cold spray and similar advanced manufacturing technologies that will enable deployed forces to continue combat operations in the face of contested logistics. If confirmed, will you advocate for adoption and standardization of technologies like high-pressure cold spray that will help mitigate the contested logistics problem set for our forward-deployed warfighters across the joint force?
Sir, cold spray is a great example of advanced manufacturing for repair and for building high-quality components, and I do commit to pushing forward those capabilities to the extent that I can influence it. Needing less forward and having to bring less forward is an opportunity that we can go after with advanced manufacturing.
Yeah, the bottom line is if we've got the ability to actually recreate or to repair items without waiting for a supply chain to deliver in a contested area of operation would mean literally saving lives, should we be able to accomplish this and to get that material out in advance. Fair enough?
Very fair, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And look, I think you are eminently qualified. I think you're the right guy for the job, and I do look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you
Senator
very much.
Hirono.
Thank you. General Mahoney, it's good to see you again. I will start with the two initial questions that I ask of all nominees before any of my committees relating to fitness to serve. So I will ask you, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator, I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator, I have not.
General, successive administrations have identified China as the pacing threat to U.S. national security and the Indo-Pacific as the priority theater. I am concerned about recent reporting that the draft National Defense Strategy deprioritizes the challenge posed by China and refocuses on the homeland and Western Hemisphere. And we've already noted that the China, North Korea, India, Russia, Iran probably are in there. They're talking to each other, China being the country with the most resources. So we're seeing this happening. And at the same time, it's very concerning that we're going to turn our face away from in the Pacific area in view of these relationships that appear to be quite obvious. So what is your best military advice on this proposed shift? And what risks would deprioritizing China in the Indo-Pacific pose on U.S. national security?
Senator, the way I would answer that is I think from 2018 NDS to the 2022 NDS and to the interim national defense strategic guidance has been fairly consistent with putting the homeland as the foundation of our strategy. But they have all been consistent as well as focusing on the Indo-Pacific. And I can't see a meaningful change or shift away from that, having not seen the final version of the NDS. I'm an old budget guy, so if you follow the investments and follow the programs, I think you will see across the services a keen focus on the Indo-PACOM theater for good reason.
So your position would be, because you will be a main advisor to President Trump as to where we should place our priorities. So as far as you are concerned, from what I'm hearing you say just now, that we should continue to focus on the Indo-Pacific as a major AOR.
Senator, I think I would, and I think you will see that borne out when the final version of the NDS comes out. And in your conversations between you and I, we know and understand that the pacing threat is Communist China.
And as we already know, China is very active in the Indo-Pacific area, putting out its resources and its tentacles with the island nations there, as well as other countries. So I think we should continue to pay attention. And I do agree with Admiral Paparo's recent comments earlier this week, where he said the homeland is in the Pacific. So that's Hawaii, Guam, CNMI, our compact partners. Needs to be prioritized. You've been asked a number of questions about JROC as the sort of the new way that we're going to deal with the needs of the joint forces. And we've already been, as I mentioned, asked questions. And I would appreciate, as I mentioned when I met with you, that you provide comments to us regarding any authorities you need in the final NDAA to deliver critical capabilities to the joint forces at speed and scale, particularly to support our warfighters in the Indo-Pacific.
Senator, I commit to you to do that. I think what I've seen in the generation of the NDAA this year and the report that we've just got done with the NDAA last year, we're on the road to real reform. I think that there is an opportunity here that we need to take advantage of.
You have always, I do want to mention about foreign assistance. There have been major cuts. USAID has set out to foreign assistance, and it is not as though is it your view that a strong military is what we need, the only thing we need to have peace in our world, or is it important to you that we maintain our ability to provide foreign aid and those kinds of relationships as being just as important? The diplomatic aspects of what we do as a leading nation is just as important as a strong and ready military.
Senator, I believe as a country we have many tools that we use, and we should use all of them.
Including our diplomatic capabilities.
Use all the tools, ma'am, yes.
Okay, war being, I would say, the last resort. Okay, my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, General. You do agree with what Admiral Paparo said, that China is reflecting a rehearsal for war.
Senator, I've been going to what the Marines call the Westpac, the Indo-Pacific Theater, since I was a first lieutenant. My last tour over there was as the deputy commander of U.S. Forces Japan. If I compare the operational and strategic landscape from my time as a first lieutenant to my time then as a major general, they are strategically, operationally, I'll leave the political and economic changes alone, they are different worlds. And we have to take stock of the fact that as that strategic terrain changes under our feet, we have to change with it. So yes, I agree with Admiral Paparo.
And again, and I hope my colleagues will indulge me for a moment. With regard to Senator Hirono's question, the soft power that we have used through USAID is a very vital part of our national defense strategy. Is that correct? Do you agree with that statement?
I would defer to the COCOMs to make a value statement on that, but as I said, among all our tools, we need to use all of them.
Very careful answer, General. Senator Scott.
Good morning. First off, you're well qualified. You're going to do a great job. I was very impressed with our meeting. The Department of War recently notified some European countries that military support under Section 333 will be phased down with the expectation that these nations and our NATO allies will step up their efforts. Now, we all know these are not unilateral or overnight decisions. They must first be approved by the Secretary of State and approved by Congress. Can you speak to how you would advise Pentagon leadership on where and why Section 333 funding is needed and how this funding provides a return on American tax dollars, or do you completely agree that we ought to completely phase it out?
I would look less, if confirmed, I would look less at the code, and I would look more at what the effect of that code is, and is it covered by something else, and strike a balance between removing something and the requirement to make sure that it is covered, Senator.
Do you feel comfortable our European allies are starting to step up?
I think we're seeing, whether it's from defense spending and with 5% commitment from most of them, I think they are. From a military standpoint, I will tell you, I think they are.
Yeah. So I think it was in March, I traveled to Denmark, Estonia, and Finland, and all three of those countries for sure are stepping up. Finland has been doing it for a long time, as we all know. They've got a pretty over 1,000-mile border with Russia, and they've always been ready. And I think they told me almost 20% of their entire population would be ready to mobilize within days if there was an invasion across their border. So one of the things they complained about, though, was our foreign military sales program. Number one, they don't understand why it takes so long to get a decision. And then number two, even after the decision's made, they're still struggling to get the equipment from American manufacturers. Can you talk about what you could do in this role to improve the military sales process and help our manufacturers get more produced and get it over to our allies when they want to buy something?
Senator, I'm not directly, should I be confirmed as a vice, I wouldn't be directly involved with FMS. But what you key on, I think a big part of the sclerotic system that you describe in FMS is the defense industrial base and the ability to produce at speed. So to the extent that I can influence the relationship of our requirements acquisition with the defense industrial base, I will do that.
So do you feel comfortable that we shouldn't rely on China for any military supplies?
I don't believe that we should rely on China or bankroll China by buying things of a military nature.
So what do you think about the Department of War buying a significant portion of the drugs from China? I'm
not familiar with that, Senator, but as a concept,
off the top of your head,
it's not a good idea.
Yeah. So do you think our Wall Street should be continuing to fund companies that help the Chinese build their military?
I don't believe that we should engage in activities that bankroll the PLA or bankroll systems that we'll find on the front in Ukraine or that we'll find in UAVs out of Iran or that we'll find north of the DMZ in North Korea.
Yeah. So any reliance we have on Chinese equipment, whether it's our ports or whether it's our computer systems, whether it's our communications infrastructure, you'd think we probably ought to walk away from Chinese producers, right?
I think we should assess the risk and then make the appropriate adjustments. Yes, Senator.
All right. Thank you. You're going to do a great job.
Thank you very much. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, for holding this hearing. And I'd like to thank you, General Mahoney, for your family here, too, for your lifetime of service to our country and for your willingness to serve. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about documenting exposure at classified locations, because I asked General Kane at his confirmation hearing about documenting exposure at data mask locations where the duty station and its existence are classified. That ensures, I want to ensure that service members' records accurately reflect service-connected injuries at those locations. I've heard from constituents who served at such locations within the Nevada Test and Training Range who believe they were exposed to radiation from our days of conducting explosive nuclear weapons testing and to burn pits which dispose of classified waste. However, as I've explained before, this committee many times, DOD does not classify the range as a place where exposure has occurred, despite the Department of Energy providing the presumption of exposure for their personnel who served at these exact locations within the range. And because their service records are data masked, these veterans can't even prove to the VA that they were ever even stationed there. I know you know where they are, in Nevada specifically. So, General, I'm very thankful the Senate version of the NDAA includes my provisions to begin addressing this issue, but we need senior Pentagon leadership to help us see it through. So, if confirmed, will you commit to working with me and this committee to ensure that the Department provides a presumption of exposure for relevant locations, such as those which the Department of Energy, well, they've already done so for their personnel. We can just follow what they're doing. And we want to ensure that those who served and, of course, are currently serving at these data masked sites receive sufficient documentation to support their health-related claims, all while protecting the classified nature of their service.
Senator, I commit to working with you. I will say that I'm not intimately familiar with the issue, but I will, if confirmed, assess that and come back to you. Just as a statement, we owe all the members high-quality health care, irrespective of where they may have served or what they did. That's an expectation when they come in to serve this country.
Thank you. I look forward to setting up that meeting to talk about the data masked locations. I want to move on to cybersecurity and resiliency because as a former computer programmer, systems analyst, I have a deep appreciation for how critical cyber and technology are to our national defense. As Vice Chairman, you'll be responsible for leading the development of the National Military Strategy. So how do you see cyber fitting into that strategy, both as a warfighting domain, as an enabler for joint operations, of course, land, sea, air, and space as a warfighting domain?
Senator, I am not a cyber expert, but as I said in my opening statement, we tend to treat cyber as this mysterious domain apart. It can no longer be treated that way. The more that we use digital technology and transport it through many different means, we have to have ability to harden and protect it, and we need to have the ability to go on offense as well in the cyber world.
Well, speaking of that, and building maybe on Senator Scott as well, do you have a feel for any specific priorities that have to be elevated in the national military strategy? We got to keep pace with our adversaries like China and Russia, for sure. Do you have any off the top of your head? Or
I'll just go back on my recent experience as kind of the Uber requirements guy in the Marine Corps. Every program that deals with digital technology, that transports digital technology, that stores it, has to have a level of cyber protection, cyber hardening.
How do you balance that with our readiness between traditional forces and then cyberspace writ large, we'll say?
Well, first, Senator, I don't think it's a choice. I think it's something that we have to invest in going in. When I talked about fully encumbered cost of attritable drones, the fully encumbered cost of any program has to include the cyber aspect and cyber hardening.
And last thing, I just want to see if you have a thought on the strategy addressing integrating cyber with our allies and partners, especially in the Indo-Pacific.
Again, if we were going to say allies and partners as part of our strategy, cyber is an organic part of how we do business, so it needs to be an organic part of our strategy.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, thanks for your service. Congratulations. Let's follow up on Senator Rosen's talk on AI. We know the direction we're headed. Future conflicts will be dominated by artificial intelligence. Emerging technologies like quantum computing. There are basically two quantum computing models, gate and annealing. we only use one of them, basically, and our adversaries use the other. Do you think that's a smart way to handle this?
Senator, thanks. Artificial intelligence, algorithmic derived systems are, again, if cyber has just become part of the normal warfighting domain, artificial intelligence is not too far behind. And we don't need to look too far to see how it's being applied, especially in the Russia-Ukraine example. We have to bring that in and make it a normal part of our programmatics.
Thank you. Let's go to a more simple topic here. I'm getting calls all the time. You know, we've spent trillions of dollars on these wars over the years, but we can't house our people on military bases. We have mold, roofs are falling in, kids are getting sick, but we can spend hundreds of billions of dollars on another country. We're an all-volunteer army. Will you commit to help solve this problem? I know it's not just your problem, but it is a huge problem, probably in recruiting. And again, our phone rings off the wall when it comes to this.
Senator, I commit to you to do just that. And I'll go on my recent experience in the Marine Corps and the Commandant's emphasis on our Barracks 2030 initiative, where we're unapologetic about the investments that we made over the last 20 years because we're fighting. We have to get back into the installations resilience business. We have to get back into the installations quality business. Two primary reasons. First, it's an expectation among soldiers, Marines, Guardians, airmen, sailors to have a good quality infrastructure place to live. Secondly, we have to look at it for what it is, which is a power projection platform. And we have to invest in that, Senator.
Thank you. Investment in our soldiers. I think that's what a lot of them are looking for. Recently, Secretary Hicks has directed the dismantling of the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System. This is core of a slow and heavily bureaucratic acquisition process. In your role as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, this change will largely be your responsibility. How will you ensure this rapid and agile system provide combat capabilities to the warfighter and allow us to keep pace with our adversaries?
Senator, you hit it right on the head. And if confirmed, as the chairman of the JROC and part of the reform process, my goal, one of my goals and priorities will be to make sure that we have end-to-end systems treatment of requirements to meaningful resources, and with acquisition built into that. So if it's 3 gears moving, they all need to be engaged with each other, and you can only move at the slowest gear. We need to quicken all those gears, requirements, acquisition, resources, and sync with them so that we get a good product. As chairman of the JROC, if confirmed, we used to say cost, schedule, and performance as the 3 parameters that we would look at a program. I think we ought to move it to schedule or speed, cost, and performance. And I will make that a priority, Senator.
Great. Sounds like you have a plan. Organization is key to winning, and you seem to be up on that. You know, one of the many things the United States Marine Corps does better than any other service is the ability to pass an audit. While not directly responsible for an audit, what lessons do you bring from the Marine Corps that will help the Department of War achieve a clean audit for the first time in many years?
Senator, you already said it. You know, organization is the key to victory, and I'm very proud of the fact that the Marine Corps has had 2 clean opinions. You heard it here first. We'll have a 3rd one. And to the extent that I can influence it, I will press to move the department along in coming out of disclaimer and getting a clean audit.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, thank you for visiting me, and thank you for your profoundly impressive service over so many years in the United States Marine Corps. We're here at a really historic moment, not only because we're commemorating 9/11, but there has been literally an attack on a NATO nation by Russia in its brazenly violating Polish airspace with a number of drones, a direct incursion into the sovereign territory of that NATO member state by an autocrat who has played the United States, has mocked American power, and stalled and stonewalled our president. I hope that you agree with me that now is the time that the United States has to show strength against Putin by reacting offensively, in the great tradition of the Marine Corps, against this unprecedented and extraordinary step of sending Russian drones into Poland.
Senator, I believe that we need to remain strong in all eventualities, this being one of them. If the Russians meant to do it, it was provocative. If they didn't mean to do it, it's an indication of incompetence. At any rate, I think what we're seeing is the Poles, the Polish armed forces, from their increase in defense spending to their increase in capability, being emblematic of that balance that we need to do just what you say, to stand up against a irredentist Russia.
Don't you find it inconceivable that this incursion was unintentional? There were so many drones, and they were sent at the same time over a long period of time, in the same time period.
From a military perspective, sir, you know, my assessment based on what I know is that it looks more intentional than not. Once again, if it wasn't, there's some significant incompetence there.
I hope that you will join me and others on this committee in demanding that our nation and our European allies increase our military aid for Ukraine so that it can resist this kind of aggression and slaughter, and heightened economic sanctions against the nations that are fueling Russia's war machine by buying Putin's oil and gas. I'm talking about India, China, Brazil. The best way to achieve peace, wouldn't you agree, is to show strength by passing the bill. It's the Graham-Blumenthal bill that would impose scorching sanctions on those nations that are, in effect, enabling Russia to continue this aggression.
Senator, I'd prefer to stay in my military lane and just say that should I be confirmed, part of my job will be to provide options for the use of power against eventualities most dangerous and most likely. And this case would be no exception.
Well, this conversation obviously will not end here, and I look forward to continuing it with you, General, when you are confirmed, and I will support your confirmation. I'm very impressed by your background. Let me just ask you finally, we've received reports that the Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of War, as he now calls himself, means for the Department of Defense to focus more on law enforcement, state and local law enforcement, and that he's issued policy directives within the Pentagon to that effect. Are you aware of those policy directives or a planned strategy paper?
In my current job, Senator, I'm not aware of that. I am not aware of any directive of that nature.
Thank you very much.
On the Marine Corps side.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to kind of pick up on that and zoom in a little bit and then zoom out. Fort Leonard Wood, which I'm sure you're familiar with in the great state of Missouri, has a lot of land and has a number of missions, including training our military police, and has also been the home of the Army's criminal investigative training, special agent training efforts. So it's well positioned after the One Big Beautiful Bill was passed, and we've got these resources out there for border enforcement to help train ICE agents. That is completely, by the way, in line with what the military can do. They're not performing a law enforcement function, but rather sharing their knowledge with agents who are charged with enforcing our laws. And by the way, that didn't used to be controversial. Bill Clinton deported a lot of people. Barack Obama deported a lot of people. So in your role and your knowledge of Fort Leonard Wood, do you think it can play a role in kind of surge training ICE agents for the important functions that they have?
Senator, I've been to Fort Leonard Wood a few times in my prior life as a counter-IED officer. I'm not aware of those functions that you discussed or the capacity there too.
Well, we'd love to get you out there. There's a lot of land and a lot of capabilities. So we're just sort of putting a marker down, and I love trying to persuade. So maybe we'll continue our
Yes, sir.
conversations. The second issue, I guess, in sort of zooming out now, I wanted to ask about, as relates to the Indo-Pacific. In your view, what do you find is what do you see as the greatest disconnect between our strategic goals in the Indo-Pacific and our actual force posture and readiness?
You've got a very capable and brilliant commander out there in Admiral Paparo, and he has aligned function, posture with the strategy, not only national strategy, but here's his theater strategy. I feel as a military man, as the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps, where we commit forces out there, I'm very happy currently with the posture of the Marine Corps pursuant to Admiral Paparo's strategy.
Okay. Well, I think as we talk about although a lot of the discussion is in Europe, we talk about a lot of pivoting to Asia. I would just ask that as you kind of dig into this new role, whatever deficiencies or disconnects or misalignment might exist, to try to work with the committee, our office specifically, we want to be helpful in that regard, because this is the future. This is the great competition, and if we're looking forward, China is our greatest adversary. It is now, and it will be presumably for the next century. And then related to that, China's moving rapidly to develop their own carrier force. How do you see the delaying of the FAXX? To me, is a real problem. How do you see delaying that project impacting our ability to compete with them?
I think what we have to do is keep our eye on the capabilities that we need. We need longer range, deeper penetration, and better sensors. To the extent that FAXX would fill that void, we need to look at that very closely.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that it does. So we'll work with you on that too. And then finally, on sort of recruitment, which is going really well, which is, I think, one of the great positives of the first 250 days or so of this current administration. I want to just ask you, as far as long-term retention, how can we or should we be incentivizing service members to continue their careers, who's, they're reaching a point where they may want to extend it or not. In your view, and in your experience, what are some of the things that we can do to make it more attractive?
I think all the services are having a very, very good year on the accession side. I can't speak to the other services as far as retention, but for the Marine Corps side, we're almost at historic levels of retention. And some of the keys that we use to that are an incentive structure. Some of the keys are bonuses. Some of the keys are lateral moves, but it's meeting the quality talent on their terms and asking the question of not why you're getting out, but how can we make you stay?
Thank you. Look forward to working with you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Mahoney, great to see you here today, and thank you for your years of service. As you know, Exercise Northern Strike in Michigan helps train thousands of service members from over 20 different countries at the National All-Domain Warfighting Center. Northern Strike takes advantage of roughly 17,000 square miles of special use and all-domain training environments for and a realistic joint force training with our global allies and partners. In his hearing before our committee, Admiral Paparo, the Indo-PACOM commander, praised Northern Strike's importance to his command, and he said, I want to quote him because it was great. He said, quote, "I treasure it, and I want more of it, and I want to expand it," end of quote. So my question for you, sir, is do you agree with Admiral Paparo's assessment of the importance of exercises like Northern Strike in Michigan? And what role should these exercises play in advancing DoD's strategic goals in the Indo-Pacific?
I'll go big to small. I know that the training area up there facilitates some great interaction of live training. I believe there's some virtual connectivity there as well. Speaking for the Marine Corps, we had our Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company up there, and V-22s also participating. And it is a great workout, in particular for the reserve and some guard. I have not been on deployment. I haven't been in a command operations center. I haven't been in support of a unit where the guard and the reserves didn't play a big part. So Northern Strike, not only for the quality of the training, but the demographic of combat power that it deals with is extremely important.
Right. Well, thank you, General. General, as you know, the AUKUS agreement is a once-in-a-generation partnership between Australia, the UK, and the US to share nuclear-powered submarine technology, as well as to enhance technology collaboration between these three allies. I was fortunate to recently visit Australia, and I was impressed not only with their cutting-edge work on unmanned technologies, but also their unwavering national commitment to the AUKUS agreement. As someone who has extensively studied a potential conflict in the Indo-Pacific, I believe that you will agree that our key advantage in the region is our long-term relationships with allies and partners, which includes AUKUS. And so my question for you, sir, is how important is AUKUS in deterring Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific? And if confirmed, would you continue to support this critical agreement?
Senator, I'll stay away from the policy side of AUKUS and just look at the potential on the military side. I have lived in Australia. I went to school in Australia. I've trained extensively with the Australians and fought with the Australians. We will not find a more capable ally and someone who has been leaning into capabilities and capacities that can only help us in the region and help us in countering communist China.
Well, as you know, there are two pillars to AUKUS. The one that tends to get most of the attention is the agreement with submarines, the Virginia-class submarines that are coming online. But I would argue Pillar 2 is equal, if not more important, which deals with advanced technologies, emerging technologies, unmanned. The programs they have like Ghost Shark and Ghost Bat, and whether in the air or undersea, are really, we had the opportunity to explore some of those endeavors, and they're incredibly impressive. Could you talk a little bit about Pillar 2 and being someone very familiar with Australia, how their capabilities will advance our ability to fight the war of the future?
To the extent that Pillar 2 will enhance our military interconnectedness, our ability to integrate and move all of those capabilities that you just talked about forward, it is a great initiative. And like I said, I have not worked in a place with the Australians where they haven't been leading forward and always willing and quite skilled, in fact, at moving capabilities forward, sometimes outpacing us.
Right. Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And today is a solemn day of remembrance. So thank you very much, General, for remembering those that lost their lives on 9/11, as well as those first responders and those that have served in the global war on terrorism. Thanks for the time that we were able to spend together in the office discussing a number of priorities. I'd like to start with the announcement of the pending National Defense Strategy. What it is doing is making clear that defending the homeland is the department's top priority. And that includes protecting our critical infrastructure, strengthening, of course, our missile defenses, and enhancing our cyber resilience. Those will really be at the forefront of our efforts. And in this mission, it does appear that the National Guard and the reserves will be an indispensable part of that equation. We know that these forces are uniquely positioned to defend the homeland, not only through disaster response, but also in emerging domains like cyber and space. And of course, I'm very partial to the National Guard and the reserves, having served in both of those. I know firsthand how vital it is in their contributions to our national defense. So, General Mahoney, with the upcoming National Defense Strategy placing that renewed emphasis on our homeland defense, how do you plan to ensure that the mission remains front and center as threats continue to grow and evolve?
Thanks, Senator. And I think the primacy of the homeland has been a key tenet of our strategies going back at least as far as 2018. And I think it has to be that way. The military reason that it needs to be that way is it must be considered as a power projection platform. You can't push off a platform that is faulty. You can't push off a foundation that is weak. And all of the attributes that you talked about have to be strengthened and fortified. Going to the Guard and Reserve, as I mentioned earlier, I have never been in a situation deployed or otherwise or contingent or combat where guardsmen and reserves weren't a big part of the picture. So to strengthen that aspect of it, not only for the homeland, but to play the away game as well is important.
No, I appreciate that very much. And just reminding people that the reason our great United States came to be, the reason our colonies came together as states and formed the great United States of America was for the common defense of our nation. So it's incredibly important that our military is positioned to defend our homeland. What role do you envision for the National Guard and our great reservists out there as they're playing a role in building a resilience against these threats, both here in the homeland and abroad?
I don't think you can realistically talk about an integrated joint approach without bringing in the Guard and Reserve. And recent history is replete with that point. So what I would say is, I know that statutorily and policy-wise, there is a differentiation between Guard, Reserve, and active. But when we look at the total force, the integrated force, and Chairman Kane as the integrator, this is a whole. This is a single demographic of combat power. Once again, whether it's at home or away.
Yeah, thank you. We have talked extensively this morning about the Defense Industrial Base and its revitalization. That is really important in order to deliver upon the safety for our great United States. We have to make sure that we have the platforms and the munitions that are available. So I'm just going to make a plug. We have facilities in Iowa, like the Iowa Army Ammunition Plant, which will be an important part of delivering munitions for our military. Also, the Rock Island Arsenal, which is situated, it actually belongs to Illinois, but is situated in the Mississippi River, dividing Iowa and Illinois, making sure that we're able to expand production and support those facilities will be very important in the future. So how do you plan to ensure that that industrial base can meet the demand for these critical systems while also sustaining support for our allies? In a very brief answer, please.
If confirmed as the chairman of the JROC, I will make sure that the Defense Industrial Base is a lead in consideration from requirements to resources.
And I will take it. I have no time remaining. Thank you very much. I look forward to supporting your confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ernst, and I'm glad you drilled down on the Guard and the Reserve. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin by associating myself with comments of my colleagues earlier in the hearing. First, Senator Wicker, I appreciate you having a moment of silence in honor of those who lost lives or family on 9/11. The attack occurred in Virginia and other locations, and also for your moment of silence to think about political violence. I did not know Mr. Kirk, but I think many of my Senate colleagues did, and some considered him an acquaintance and some considered him a friend. And so I offered prayers for his family and the university community yesterday, but as I'm sitting here looking at colleagues who may have known him, I know how devastating it was to our colleagues, Senator Klobuchar and Senator Smith, when their friends were killed a couple months back. And so I feel for my colleagues, anybody in this body who knew or friends with, acquaintance with Mr. Kirk. It's just so sad. There's been 300 instances of political violence in this country since January 6th. We have a colleague, Senator Kelly, whose life was dramatically changed. We have a colleague, Congressman Scalise, whose life was dramatically changed by political violence. And those of us on this committee who travel around the world and interact with leaders, they kind of look at us as like, this is who you are. We don't really think it's who we are, but it's becoming so common. And we have to figure out a way out of it. I don't have any answers, but I'm very troubled this morning in the aftermath of it. I want to thank Senator Reid for raising the questions that you raised about the Venezuela strike. The idea of the framers that we should not be engaged in military action without Congress, they came up with that idea when George Washington was the president. They had a president they revered who was a great military leader, and yet they didn't think the decision about use of military force in hostilities should be dependent upon one person. And we have yet to get answers about some critical aspects of the attack. And the decision to interdict versus attack is a really important one, because interdiction often gets you evidence that you can then use to prosecute or go after the higher-ups or the kingpins. And so we still don't have an understanding of why there was an attack rather than an interdiction. Many of my colleagues have joined me in a letter seeking answers to those questions, and I hope we'll get them. And finally, I want to associate myself with Senator Blumenthal and the sanctions bill that's currently on the table before us that has overwhelming bipartisan support. I can understand a desire to pause action on that while we would seek some resolution with Russia and Ukraine. But during the pause, what we've seen is Russian aggression grow in Ukraine, against EU offices in Ukraine, and now against Poland. And I agree with you, General Mahoney, whether it was intentional, which I think it likely was, or unintentional, which would raise a whole set of other troubling questions. I do believe there needs to be a response from the administration and from this body. Let me ask you this, General Mahoney. You're very well qualified for the position. I support your nomination. I appreciated our visit. The press is reporting that the DOD is going to send its reconciliation spending plan to Congress sometime in September. Do you have any information here today about the status of that plan and when we will likely see it?
I don't have any specific information on that, Senator. I know as the Uber budget guy in the Marine Corps, we have put our spend plan together and submitted it. I do not know when it will be delivered.
Okay. The reconciliation bill called for it by August 22. I'm not completely surprised that it was not to us by then, because this is a big amount of money and we want to make sure we spend it the right way. But I do hope we get it soon, so that in response to Senator Wicker's questions, I know you'll make sure we execute on the plan, but we're very interested in that plan here. I want to ask you, General Mahoney, you've often been before our readiness subcommittee in earlier iterations. I want to ask you some readiness questions. How will you think about assessing readiness across the joint force, especially when it comes to preparedness for executing O-plans?
And I think we might have discussed this in readiness. There is the man, train, and equip aspect of it that the services own. And then there is the exercises versus O-plan that are primarily owned by the COCOMs. I think the chairman, as the integrator, also has an exercise flow where he brings all those things together to work out the entire joint force end to end, whether it's versus a specific O-plan or scenario, or whether it's through derived scenarios as well. So it looks like a pyramid from the services going up to the chairman as the global integrator.
I'll just say, as I hand back, readiness of joint enablers like strategic lift, contested logistics, communications networks, very important, especially in Indo-PACOM. I know you're aware of that. The fact that you've done so much work in the Indo-PACOM already, I think, is going to stand you in a good place.
As a follow, I believe that's why the chairman's role as the global integrator is so important, because of those enablers that may not exist on a magenta line that defines a COCOM.
Yep, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Sheehy.
Morning, General. Congratulations on your nomination. Great to speak with you the other day at the Marine Corps welcome back reception. Culture, warfighting, recruiting, those are your job. Those are Secretary Hegseth's job. As I expressed to you, my core concern is our ability to fill the magazines, build the ships, maintain the planes, and ensure that when our warfighters go toe-to-toe with our next adversary, they have the platforms that they need. And a 21st century warfare, as we're seeing, is inherently a platform warfare environment. And right now, our platform capabilities, although exquisite on the drawing board and exquisite in the test range, it's hard to scale them, they're expensive, and they're hard to replace. And my sole focus on this committee right now is to ensure that the next time we face off with an adversary, and we have holes in the bottom of the ocean, and we have parachutes coming out of cockpits because planes are being shot down, we have the ability to have a force that's attritable, that is replaceable, scalable, and that can be done quickly in a battlefield time frame. So right now, we have a shipbuilding industry that has become sclerotic. Our ability to scale those and stabilize requirements to produce ships repeatedly, quickly, is challenged. That can also be carried over to our aircraft manufacturing capability. What are going to be there's been studies and op-eds and articles and hearings about this ad nauseum for years, and we've been talking about it, but nothing has really changed fundamentally, and the time for change is now. But we can't continue to have commissions and studies and papers and reports and McKinsey and Rand and every other consulting company comes in and gives us a 1,000-page report of how to fix it. We need to start fixing it. It needs to start now. So what is your day one, week one, year one plan to begin fixing this industrial-based challenge so that we're ready for the next war?
Senator, thanks, and thanks for the time in your office. I've been on the JROC now for about 2 years, and some of the smartest people on the planet do the analysis, do the gap analysis, the capability portfolio management reviews. What we need to do is make sure that that is done in time that we have yet to consider. 800 days, not good. So there's a time aspect to it, and then there's a step change that needs to happen once you go from a solution identification to bringing industry in. And in my opening comments, I said all of industry. We've been glued to, and in some cases rightfully so, a small group of vendors that have come down from a larger group in the past, and we need to invite smaller, we need to invite different, more innovative and fast-moving companies into the acquisition process earlier. That is the only way, I believe, that we're going to see the step change that we require. So lower the barriers to entry, incentivize these companies to come in, engender competition, which will engender speed, which will engender product, greater capabilities and greater quality. And from day one of the JROC, I'll pick up where Admiral Grady left off and push those lines of effort forward. And I don't want to run on here too much, but I said earlier, the requirements to resources continuum, the system, the gears that run, we have to keep an eye on that from the beginning to the end, or one of the gears will become disengaged, or it'll start running slow, and we'll be back where we started. One other point. The gold-plated in 800 days is not sufficient when we can get the operationally relevant in a very short period of time. It's, like the acquisition Pareto principle. Let's get the 80% solution in 20% of the time at 20% of the cost, instead of 100%, 800 days later at some astronomical cost that we can neither afford or control.
Well, I agree with that 100%. And, when it comes to the Navy, I'd rather have 100 frigates than 5 destroyers. And we need to accept risk again in our acquisition process. In an effort to reduce risk, we've created a process that's focused on the process, not on the outcome. We need to accept iteration as part of it, accept that each iteration is not going to be perfect, and we can continue to refine that product. But gold-plated requirements in engineering to perfection will create a brittleness in our acquisition process that is going to remove the scale and speed that we need. So thank you for your focus on that. You have my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt. Thank you, Senator Sheehy. I know you, and I can see that far, but not much further. I think Senator Slotkin is next. Is that you down there? Yes, okay.
Thank you, Chairman. General Mahoney, welcome. Thank you for being here, and particularly on a solemn day. This was my first anniversary of 9/11 in the Senate, and I was heartened to hear the sirens go off this morning at the exact times that the planes hit, and to hear there was a voice that came over, I think, the entire campus, noting that there had been a plane headed for this building on that day. So I thought that was an important reminder. You are nominated to be the number 2, the vice chairman. So that means you will be the number 2 in the country military advisor to the President of the United States. Our troops are intended by law to protect against foreign adversaries and to never advance the interest of one political party or their political agenda. That's one of the things I think we can agree on that separates us from a place like China. You will have that responsibility of giving best military advice, but also, as we discussed in my office, representing the interests of the military and the reputation of the military, which I know you've given your life to. I mean, you've done incredible service for this institution that as we discussed, really raised you to be the 4-star general that you are. You're also coming from being the assistant commandant to the Marine Corps. And that means you oversaw the 700 Marines that deployed to LA along with the National Guard without the consent of the governor out there in June and July. And according to a report, a DOD report that came out through Reuters, it was a document that said, entitled Los Angeles Civil Unrest Standing Rules for the Use of Force. And it stated, quote, that the very nature of domestic operations, American military forces operating in U.S. communities, has such significant implications that the mistakes of a few soldiers can have far-reaching social, political, and operational effects. And the document cites a cautionary tale of Marine Corporal Clemente Benuelos, who many years ago was on a joint mission and in 1997 in Texas, and saw a high schooler with a rifle. The high schooler was herding goats and ended up killing that high schooler. Can you walk me through, you're now wanting to be the number 2 military advisor to the president. What issues did you raise when you got the order to send 700 Marines? What concerns did you have? What did you sort of push and pull in that conversation to make sure to protect both civilians but the reputation of the military?
Senator, thanks. And when that order came down, our discussion was, how do we accomplish the mission? And are we trained, manned, and equipped for it? And that discussion went on very seriously from the commandant right on down to the company commanders that we're going to go forward. I will tell you that we trained to the standing rules of the use of force. We trained to de-escalation techniques. We trained on the personal protective equipment, which I would expect of Marines to do before they left the assembly area. And I will tell you that the deepest conversation and the deepest concern with making sure that those Marines were ready to execute orders professionally were those battalion commanders and those company commanders to talk about reputation of the cloth. They would not step forward across the line of departure until they were man trained and equipped to accomplish the mission that they had been given.
So if you were asked, now the president talks about sending troops to other places, if you were asked to change the rules of engagement to include arrest, detention of American citizens, hot pursuit. Instead of, tag teaming with law enforcement, you were asked to change those rules of engagement so that the U.S. military would be engaging in what I believe to be unlawful actions in the streets of America. Would you push back on that or other illegal orders that contravene the Constitution?
Before I go too far down the hypothetical here, which is reasonable, my best military judgment in my position now, or should I be confirmed, will be based on the facts and circumstances and the tasks that we've been given and the effect that we're trying to achieve and the training that we need in order to do it. That entire cascade of receipt of order to culling out the tasks, explicit and implied, building courses of action.
I understand, but if something was, and this is almost an issue of conscience at this point, right? We're relying on your issue of conscience, that if you were asked to do something that contravened the Constitution and would greatly hurt the reputation of the military, that you, privately, I don't need you to do it publicly, but that you would stand up and push back and give your best military advice against such actions.
Senator, and I will do that publicly, that is an easy question. If I am ever put into a situation where 38 years of an oath is put at risk to do something different, the answer is simple. I will adhere to my oath to the Constitution. That's what is expected from the chairman. That's what's expected from the entire National Command Authority and from the American people.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I believe my time is up.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Budd.
Thank you, Chairman. General, it's good to see you. Enjoyed the time last week in the office. Thanks for your comments in regards to the solemnness of this day. And thanks for your willingness and head of your family to continue to serve. So one of my priorities in this role has been to reform the foreign military sales process. In our travels to visit with allies around the world, that's been a continual point of frustration. We want them to get the weapons and the equipment in places like Taiwan and the Philippines, and we want it to be done more quickly. One recommendation I've heard is to bake exportability into the production of these technologies at the outset of the development. Now, that development is constrained by the requirements that you would put into the process. So what do you think about baking exportability into the requirements?
Senator, I just am not a foreign military sales specialist, but I will go to, I think, the commonality between the defense industrial base, what they produce, how they produce it, how quickly they produce it, and foreign military sales. I mean, the defense industrial base and the foreign military sales industrial base are essentially the same thing.
So if we could just broaden the question a bit, if you may not be an expert on foreign military sales, giving your best military advice, do you think there are ways that we could speed up the process and that we should?
And I think in pursuant to the discussions we've had today, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Let's talk about training. I know you have a history as an aviator and you're familiar with the limitations that the frontline units face, particularly with their training ranges, threat replication, OPSEC protocols, just to name a few. These limitations impact the training and readiness of the joint force for near-peer conflict. So if confirmed, how would you approach overcoming these challenges?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. And as a career aviator, we have run into restrictions in airspace, restrictions in emissions, restrictions in the physical space below you, what you can expend, how you can expend it. So the two ways to get beyond that, and that's virtual and constructive elements of the training continuum. You will never get, in my opinion, beyond the live feedback, the live aspect, but in order to sensitize and work out the longer range systems, the more exquisite systems, the systems that need to emit and receive without tipping your hand and also getting a workout, we need to emphasize virtual and constructive aspect as well. So that live, virtual, constructive continuum, those parts make up the greater part of the whole.
Thank you, General. So one of the provisions I led in this year's NDAA, it strengthens the department's ability to use tactical data links, something I imagine you know a lot about, specifically Link 16. and for testing and for training in the National Airspace System. So can you speak about the importance of Link 16 in the joint warfighting concept and the importance of preventing bureaucracy from impeding the ability in how we train and how we fight?
And Senator, this links back to the discussion we just had about limitations on training ranges and being able to use certain waveforms. As an aviator, I've been using Link 16 for a long time. It is the data link system of record, and it is critical to joint command and control. So accommodations that can be made to use that waveform, to use that data link so that we're expert at it. Once again, we don't get under center with no reps with the data link across the systems is extremely important.
Thank you, General. A different topic. In your understanding, who currently owns the DoD's requirements for joint protection from unmanned aerial systems?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the joint?
Yeah, unmanned aerial systems. So who in the department owns that? Is in charge of it? Let me preface it just a little bit more. I understand that Northcom acts as a synchronizer here, kind of a consultant on that. But as you see it right now, are you satisfied with the jointness of the requirements and the solutions moving forward in regards to unmanned aerial systems?
This is an area where maybe we were slow on the get-go, but we're moving very, very quickly. We have service executives, and we have a combined joint task force for UAS and for county UAS, and I'm happy that we're moving at speed now, and everybody in what was kind of ungoverned space is starting to move in the same direction.
Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to serve. I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you, Senator Budd. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Mahoney, thank you for your service, obviously, and thank you for our great conversation this week. I could spend my time with you discussing real security challenges facing the joint force, but I am instead forced to address the unthinkable, following up on Senator Slotkin's question about deploying military to our nation's cities. The President of the United States has actually declared war on Chicago and is threatening to send troops there, not against a foreign enemy, not in response to an armed attack, not in response to a natural disaster or riots in the streets. He is simply declaring war on an American city. General, do you think it's appropriate for our troops to be performing policing duties on Americans on U.S. soil?
Senator, I think the appropriate use of the military is to protect all Americans under all circumstances.
Answer my question, General. Do you think it is appropriate for our troops to be used to perform policing duties on Americans on U.S. soil?
Policing duties is not a direct mission that I'm aware of, certainly not for the Marine Corps.
Thank you. The President seems to think so. He has declared war on Chicago. He's puffing his chest, brazenly threatening to use the military to stage chaos and fear in our community so he can swoop in and normalize having military personnel on the streets of America. This is political theater that our fine men and women in uniform did not sign up for. General, if confirmed and the President asked the military to deploy to an American city, would you unequivocally advise against the military engaging domestically in arrests, detentions, and violations of civil rights?
Senator, I would comply with the law. I will comply with my experience of 38 years and my oath that I've taken to the Constitution. I cannot imagine any situation where our task would be to violate any American citizen's civil rights.
Okay. I've directly heard from constituents who are scared that our nation's armed forces will come to their door, that uniformed troops will come to their child's school, to their workplace, to be arrested, to be thrown into unmarked vehicles and pulled onto a military base to be detained there. Trump is intentionally blurring the lines between the military and the police to intimidate those who dare to speak out against his harmful policies. This separation of our military and the police forces is core to our Constitution, which everyone in uniform, including you and me and my colleagues on this dais, have sworn an oath to defend. Our founders enshrined protections in our Bill of Rights to protect Americans from this kind of abuse after the British Army invaded homes and engaged in unreasonable searches and seizures. As a daughter of the American Revolution, whose family has fought for this nation From its founding, I am horrified that President Trump is shredding the Constitution to turn our nation's military against Americans. Everyone deserves to feel safe from crime. But our nation's military is not the best tool to fight it. That's what the police are for. But Trump slashed at least $800 million from initiatives to prevent local crime, curb illegal guns, and support victims of crime. So let's be clear, Donald Trump does not care about crime. You and I, General, both know how costly it is for our military to take our eyes off the ball. And I appreciated your commitment to me, if confirmed, to ensure the joint forces focus on the Indo-Pacific, an area where you have substantial experience, both on deployments and in a leadership role. I am concerned that forcing the military to turn against their fellow Americans takes away time, attention, and resources from innovating and solving the security challenges in the Indo-Pacific. We know the military can do its job, but I don't think our military should be patrolling the streets as they are here in D.C., where they are spending their time with their M4s picking up garbage. While our troops are focused on policing, who is guarding us against foreign threats? What risks to our national security are we willing to swallow? We've already seen our adversaries taking advantage, but President Trump won't stand up to Putin, so he's picking a fight with Chicago. The military will always answer the call to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. But you and I both know that if the military has to support this dangerous distraction and execute all of its core missions at the same time, it will stretch our military too thin. You are more than qualified for this position, General, but I am deeply concerned that there will be a price to be paid by our troops and American people for this president's hubris and this president's attempts to normalize putting troops on the streets in our city. And I hope that you will stand up and advise against, as you've already committed to doing, misuse of our military and unconstitutional use of our military. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gillibrand.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to talk here today. General Mahoney, I echo some of the concerns that were mentioned by Senator Duckworth. We are in a time of grave risk, challenges, adversaries rising, the investments that China have made over the past 15 years in militarization, the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East. These are huge pressures on United States citizens and United States security and security of our allies. And the most important job that you have is to express advice and guidance to the President of the United States that is based on your years of acumen, study, and experience. And we need you to understand that you could be the difference between an action that is harmful and an action that is helpful based on your years of experience. And so my fundamental question to you is, are you prepared to stand in the breach of a terrible decision and the right decision for the national security and for the United States?
The direct answer, Senator, is yes. 2 sub-bullets. I commit to you to adhere to the oath that I took as a second lieutenant, and then I've repeated right up until 4-star. And the second point is, if there is divergence from that oath, I will speak out.
Thank you very much, General. This is the most important job you will ever do in your career, and the responsibility on your shoulders is significant. So we, as the Senate, as the Armed Services Committee, will be trusting in you to give us unfiltered advice, to give the President of the United States unfiltered advice, and to not stand down when opposed by people in the administration who disagree with you. You must stand forthrightly and always give the right advice.
I commit to that, Senator.
Thank you very much. A second question I just want to address with you. We have a rising issue of unmanned aerial drones. We have a rising challenge of drone incursions over military bases, such as Langley. We have drone incursions now over allies that we just as most recently in the news. We need a policy with regard to our own national security about how we are going to use drone technology, how we are going to defend against drone technology. And in my opinion, the biggest blind spot we have in the United States is domestic blindness. We don't have a solution if an adversarial drone is hovering over a major city or a major sporting event or a major musical event. We don't have a policy if adversarial drones are hovering over Langley for 2 weeks straight with no recourse and no decision being made to do something about it. And we don't yet have all the technology and investment that we need to make sure that we can prepare and respond appropriately to know who are manning those drones. If it is an adversarial nation, if it is a terrorist organization, if it is a spy network. That is the kinds of intelligence that we need to be able to have a policy that's effective. I would like your commitment that you will work with this committee on a very robust drone policy about how to keep civilians safe over large gatherings such as sporting events and concerts, as well as our men and women who serve in the armed services when they are hovering over our important intelligence sites, important military sites, important equipment sites. I need to have that commitment that you will take this as seriously as the proliferation of war that it could well be.
Senator, you have my complete commitment, and you just described the tapestry of how we need to go about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kelly, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, great seeing you again. Good to see an A6 intruder pilot here in front of the committee. I love that airplane. I want to discuss electronic warfare with you. As you know, we face a lot of challenges in the Western Pacific. The EW environment is changing dramatically. And to be successful in a conflict, we are going to have to utilize some non-kinetic capabilities as well beyond what we can today. And that means we need to be able to test and experiment and train all in a realistic operational environment across all domains against emerging technologies and peer threats. That's why in the fiscal year 26 NDAA, we added a provision to carry out a demonstration of a joint multi-domain kinetic and non-kinetic testing and training environment across the services by connecting existing ranges and training sites in the Western states, so stitching these things together. And we've seen efforts like the Western Regional Range Complex, where it can provide warfighters with realistic training in both very complex and congested multiple domain and electronic magnetic spectrum environments through a combination of advanced live and virtual and constructive environments with advanced modeling, simulation, all together with the relevant threat systems. So in your view, General, how important is it to have joint multi-domain testing and training environments that blends kinetic and non-kinetic efforts and effects to enable realistic training?
Senator, it's critical, and it's not an option. When back in the A6 days, we used to be pretty good at this, of penetrate, exploit, using the EM spectrum, whether it was EA6Bs, whether it was F-111s, and we got out of that business for a long time, probably for the right reasons. But all the things that you indicate, and going back to Senator Budd's point about training, live, virtual, constructive, stitching together the ranges, having the ability to emit and receive and work out the systems is critical. It's not a choice.
And can you talk a little bit about how this applies to a conflict with China, which I do not believe is inevitable, but a conflict with China in the Western Pacific?
Use of, exploitation of, and the ability to manipulate the EM spectrum is part of your warfighting function of fires, of intel, et cetera. And you have to be able to do that in the way that you just spoke about from a training perspective in order to apply it should we have to fight.
And what are some of the challenges to getting this established here in CONUS, and how are we going to overcome these challenges?
If confirmed as the chairman of the JROC, this will be one of the key operational problems that we pursue, which is electronic warfare more specifically, but electromagnetic spectrum, you can use the word dominance or exploitation. So in my position, should I be confirmed, this will be an operational problem that we will hit head on.
Yeah, I think it's a multi-department approach here. We're going to have to work with the FAA. We've already started to do some of that. But to be able to get this airspace appropriately stitched together, and also even beyond the EW, training, as weapon systems become more advanced, air-to-air missile systems are becoming longer range, so we need bigger ranges. The stick is longer. We can't have guys, having to turn and just immediately take a shot, virtual or real, and then immediately turn around and try to do it again. I mean, that gets, really challenging. I have another question about, before I was an A6 guy, I was at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. Talk a little bit briefly in my remaining time about how important it is for us to rebuild our U.S. Merchant Marine when you're considering logistics across a 5,000-mile Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, you want a new idea, read an old book and look at the Merchant Marine and how they enabled victory in World War II. We need to take that not as an exact model, but as an exemplar of how we need to build back merchant shipping, merchant sailors from the master on down.
All right. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, General Mahoney, on your nomination. This administration's politicization of the military undermines our democracy and is a betrayal of the men and women who signed up to put their lives on the line to protect this country. The Posse Comitatus Act is clear that the military generally should not be used for domestic law enforcement activities, but the Trump administration has deployed the military to perform law enforcement functions in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., and threatened to send troops into Chicago, Baltimore, and New Orleans. When Secretary Hegseth came before this committee in June, I asked him how many American cities he would deploy troops to, and he wouldn't rule out any number, even if those missions put our military readiness at risk. General Mahoney, if you are confirmed, you will be responsible for overseeing joint military requirements. If this committee asks for your best military judgment on whether these operations are hurting readiness, will you share any concerns with us?
Senator, I will.
Okay, I appreciate that. A U.S. District Court recently ruled that the Trump administration willfully, that's their word, violated the Posse Comitatus Act during the troop deployment in Los Angeles. Arrests and detention should only be performed by civilian law enforcement, not the military. But the court found both bystanders and federal agencies, including the military commander, were unable to distinguish the members of the military from federal law enforcement agencies. General Mahoney, federal courts may soon find that deployments to Washington, Chicago, and Baltimore were illegal. If confirmed, will your military advice be to act in accordance with the findings of federal courts?
Senator, they will. In the fullness of a judicial process, if something is found legal or illegal, the advice will be based on that finding as a conclusive finding.
Okay, you're going to follow the courts then?
That's correct.
All right. So earlier this year, the Trump administration took $1 billion that Congress had appropriated for barracks renovations and redirected that money for border operations. This is funding meant to address barracks that have become completely unlivable, places with overflowing sewage and fire systems that don't work. You provided testimony to the Readiness Subcommittee earlier this year that investing in quality of life, quote, specifically our barracks for our Marines, close quote, are key investments, quote, if we are going to count on them to generate a lethal force. But the cost of asking the military to police American communities is only going to grow and eat into funds that are specifically designated by Congress to support our troops. So, General Mahoney, will you commit to providing this committee with your best military advice if you believe that funding is being moved without congressional authorization in a way that undermines service members' quality of life?
Senator, I commit to giving you my best military advice on all issues, this one included.
I appreciate that. You know, it is completely un-American to unleash our troops on U.S. cities over the objections of their democratically elected governors and mayors. This president recently posted that Chicago will, quote, find out why it's called the Department of War, while he since denied that he meant to declare war on our own citizens. Make no mistake, this is dangerous. We cannot let the military become a political weapon to intimidate our communities. And I urge my Republican colleagues to wake up and stop the president and the secretary from grossly abusing his authority and abusing our military. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. This concludes today's hearing. I'd like to thank our witness for his testimony. For the information of members, questions for the record will be due to the committee by 12 p.m. on Friday. We are adjourned.